If you're in the market for one of these things, let us save you hours of research and take you through all the pros and cons when it comes to used Mark IV Golfs, especially the R32. And that means showing you all of the potential issues that this stunning exterior can have, and all the potential problems with the interior. And we're going to show you the good and the bad when it comes to actually driving and living with these.
And we're going to tell you what to prepare for in terms of mechanical reliability, and yeah, that can be scary.
Tell you what, how about we start with the wonderful driving experience that might not be as wonderful as you're hoping. Actually, you know what? Let's get into the good news first. I completely agree with the owners here. No matter what speed you're doing or where or how you're driving, the R32 just feels special, properly special all the time. I mean, yes, it's a Volkswagen Golf, but it's packing a 3.2 litre engine up the front. That's wild. And it's a 6-cylinder, so the power delivery is just silky smooth, and you've got this delicious amount of torque. Just pulling out of a driveway is so enjoyable. Like coming out of this roundabout here we go, just, oh, so smooth. And then obviously you have the sound. Now look, I don't care what budget we're talking about. This engine is one of the all-time great sounding engines. I mean, listen to this. Oh, yes. Again, you don't have to drive it fast to enjoy it, but this engine, it's like it coaxes you into driving like a dickhead just so you can experience all the delight that it has. Even the steering, like Volkswagen, oh my God, Volkswagen, what have you done? Why can't your modern cars feel as good to actually steer like this thing? It's wonderful. But now the bad news. By modern standards, it's not actually all that fast. In fact, the current Mazda MX-5 will beat this in a 0 to 100 km/h sprint. And the lesser models, like including the Mark IV GTI, how do we put this? They can be very underwhelming to drive. Plus, nothing can ruin a driving experience faster than having the things that actually control the car being a bit shit. For example, this shifter bushes wearing out, that's a known issue. Basically, you have it in gear, but it just still wobbles around like crazy. Although this can just be fixed with replacement bushes. And here in Australia, we didn't get the DSG models, but you know what? That might be for the best because they were some of the very first DSGs on the market. And these days they can be very slow and grumpy. Also, and look, this might not be a big concern if you're just planning on having an R32 as sort of your weekend toy, but if you do have, let's say, an enthusiastic right foot, the fuel consumption can be a bit confronting. And obviously the smaller engines and the lesser Golfs, they can be far more fuel efficient, but then you're missing out on all this beautiful 6-cylinder magic. Now, the right tyres on these are critical if you want the full R32 experience. They need premium performance rubber. If they're not wearing that, it could be a sign that the previous owner might be cutting financial corners, and you don't want that. And the same can be said for the suspension. All of the suspension components need to be at their best to give you the full, R32 experience. The problem is at this age, the bushes could be worn out, the struts have probably seen better days, other components can just be well past their use by date. If the steering is sort of pulling to one side or the other, especially under braking, or there's any kind of clunking or vibrations coming through the seat of your pants when you're driving, yeah, you might be up for some new suspension components. But a hot tip from the owners here, do your homework when it comes to aftermarket parts. Plenty have reported that with quality aftermarket suspension, it can completely transform the car. And they're already amazing to drive in standard form. Plus, the right aftermarket parts can often cost less and last longer than the OEM stuff. Actually, you might be almost forced into buying aftermarket parts, but we'll get to that in a second. But another distraction to what should be a wonderful driving experience can be having to listen to the endless rattles and creaks and noises coming from all the aging plastic interior trim. Now, it can sound and feel a whole lot more solid in here compared to a Mark V, 6 or 7 Golf, but just like those cars, all of these interior plastics are renowned for becoming incredibly brittle, especially in the harsh Australian climate. Components like the glove box handle breaking off, that's extremely common. The dash can warp up near the defroster vents. The switch surrounds and the vent blades, these can all crack and fall apart. And broken storage bin mechanisms, they're all a common problem. Even behind the scenes, if you've pulled bits of the interior apart to fix other problems that we'll get to shortly, various tabs and clips and just components can literally just fall to pieces. And frustratingly, some of those replacement parts are simply no longer available from Volkswagen. However, 3D printing and aftermarket parts can often get you out of trouble. But they can't fix the rubberized kind of soft touch surfaces that can get all a bit tacky. Honestly, when you touch certain things like this, it feels a bit sticky, like my skin. But look, plenty of owners are just removing all these rubberized surfaces and repainting it, and that makes a huge difference. Actually, you know what? Let's just focus on some of the positives in here, because I, for one, love this interior design. It's so simple and also just so intuitive. Basically, I love the fact that you don't need some sort of an IT degree just to work out how everything in here operates. Actually, look, Volkswagen, actual tactile buttons to push when you want to operate things. Why can't your current cars do that anymore? This is when you got shit right. Plus, being a Golf, it means it's a genuinely practical little car. You've got an excellent sized glove box there. You've got a little storage space down here for your garage door remote. There is a cigarette lighter there. We're going to ignore that for a moment because that's disgusting, at least smoking is. This is going to collect all sorts of filth, as is that. Door bins are an okay size. You're not going to fit a bottle in there at all. Has flip out cup holders. What I love about these, you've got little floor sections and little grippy claw sections to hold your small pretentious coffee. This morning I had a double ristretto with a dash of oat milk and it would have fit perfectly just there. Also, it's nice that these plastics haven't fallen to pieces. But while some of the other plastics might not be aging all that well, according to the R32 owners, all this beautiful brushed aluminium finish, it does age really nicely. It's quite resilient to use. Even over here, like this gets a hell of a workout, but it doesn't look too bad. And for me, all this stuff looks just purposeful enough. It's like just the right amount of kind of special visual cues to make this thing stand out. Speaking of looking purposeful and having just the right amount of special visual bits, how sexy is this thing? I mean, the 3-door body shell is so handsome and I think they're aging so well. Also, the R32 is the epitome of cool. What I mean is that to non-car people, they just go, oh yeah, that's a nice looking Volkswagen Golf. But to those of us that know, we know what's going on. Honestly, it has to be one of the all-time great sleeper cars. But it's still a super practical hatchback. There's a great amount of space back here. Also, it's a good rectangular shape, so actually fitting boxes and stuff in here is easy. The seats obviously fold down and you get more space, although when they're folded, there is a bit of a lip here, and that can be a bit annoying. But speaking of annoying, the actual handle for the tailgate, these are known to become extremely brittle with age, and they break. But fun fact about the exterior, that iconic blue color, they often command quite the premium on the used market. That's if you can find one for sale in the first place, because my God, don't these things sell basically instantly the minute they're advertised? In fact, the values of late have increased substantially as the cars, they move into kind of collector status. Currently, you're going to be looking at anywhere from about $35,000 to potentially over $60,000, and that is thanks in part to these things being very rare. Officially for Australia, only 200 were brought here, and that just adds to the collector status. And that can mean that a mint condition R32, or to a lesser extent, even a mint condition V6 4Motion, could be a sound long-term asset, unlike the rest of the Mark IV range. For a GL, a GLE, or even a GTI to be worth really anything these days, they have to be in extraordinary condition, and ideally a post-2000 or 2003 update car, as they did receive a few subtle interior tweaks and revised options depending on the model in the market. Otherwise, they tend to populate the sort of $2,000 to $10,000 used car bracket. And they're that cheap because there are quite a few other common exterior issues that you really do need to know about. Like the fact that any of the painted plastics can be extremely susceptible to harsh UV sunlight. The clear coat and the paint can fade, and the plastics in general can just become incredibly brittle. For the models with plastic headlights, so not the R32, these are glass, the plastic ones, they can fade, they can also let condensation in. Now, to fix these, it can be a great little DIY project, but worst case scenario, you might have to replace the entire headlight cluster. Anything made of rubber, like the door sills or the wiper blades, they're probably well past their use by date by now. But again, a hot tip, check out the aftermarket parts instead of the OEM stuff. especially on the wiper blades. Actually, you know what? To save you time and money, simply scan that QR code or hit the WiperTech link down below to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades in the business. Or better yet, do what Michael has done with his R32 here and lend us your car to feature. And that way, we're going to give you a set of WiperTech blades for free as a thank you present. To volunteer your car, simply email me. My email address is down below there. Now, rust is far less prevalent in warmer climates like here in Australia, but it isn't absent. Make sure you check the lower part of the front quarter panels here behind the front wheels. Under the rear, especially any of the sill areas, or the jacking points. Also behind the side skirts where debris can accumulate. Check around the Volkswagen badge on the hatch and the door hinges. Actually, you know what? Just check the entire car because any surface rust, it can be hiding more serious corrosion underneath. Also, on cars that have a sunroof, the drainage channels, they can clog with debris really easily. If this happens, water can leak into the car, it can pool under the carpets, and that can lead to all sorts of electrical issues. Speaking of which, the door latch mechanism and the micro switches, these things fail all the time. In fact, it's not a matter of if, it's a when. Plus the central locking, it can fail due to a whole bunch of broader electronic issues. Basically, any car you're looking at buying, just make sure it does lock and unlock properly. Also, the electric window regulators, they use little plastic clips, and guess what? They can become brittle and they can break. Now, this means that the window can just fail to rise to the occasion, or worse still, it drops down into the door, never to be seen again. But look, this can be a DIY fix. Just make sure you check the owners groups and forums for advice on how to do it. And there are aftermarket replacement clips and full window regulator assemblies available to sort all this sort of stuff out. But the instrument cluster LCD fading, that's inevitable, it is going to happen, but do your homework on the owners groups and the forums because there are people around the world now that can fix these. Actually, another positive, the Climatronic climate control system, generally these should work perfectly. There are the odd reports of certain temperatures or fan speeds only working on a particular setting. Chances are this is just the blower motor resistor failing, but the good news is that should be a really inexpensive and easy fix. Actually, the same can be said for the infotainment systems. The factory ones are just old and shit now. They obviously have no kind of phone connectivity at all, but you can fit a host of different aftermarket systems that'll give you wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and the latest in Bluetooth. You can fit high-def rear view cameras and all sorts of technology. And you can fit aftermarket speakers and extra sound deadening. And to take you through all this sort of stuff, we teamed up with our mates from Automotive Superstore to make basically the ultimate in-car entertainment guide video. By the way, they carry hundreds of thousands of parts and accessories for whatever car you have. The link for that video is down below, and to check out Automotive Superstore, simply scan that QR code. But the overall ergonomics in here, so good. So good. The driving position is absolutely spot on. I instantly found a comfy spot, and just where everything is just makes sense. And I totally agree with the owners. This chunky leather steering wheel is honestly one of the best I've used regardless of the price of the car. This feels like supercar levels of tactile. And then we have these seats. Wow, Koenig, you have done a phenomenal, amazing job. If you've never sat in one of these, find a way to do it. They're just perfection. They're the right amount of supportive, but you never get uncomfortable or a numb bum after a long trip. These seats alone are worth the price of entry for the whole car. Maybe that's a stretch, but they're bloody fantastic. But in the back seat, I'm exactly 8 centimeters shorter than celebrity Mark IV R32 owner, and actually possibly my biggest influence to do this job in the first place, Mr. Jeremy Clarkson. This is in my driving position. Let's do the positives first. The seats, a bit like the front, really comfortable. They feel like they've actually got a bit of support to them as well, but very, very nice. Zero legroom. As you can see, my legs are crushed here. My best mate used to own a 5-door GTI Mark IV, and it had a lot more room in the back seat than this particular guy. But because the windows are so large, yeah, the seat's back on my legs here, but I don't feel too claustrophobic at all. I actually wouldn't mind hanging back here for a little while. It's not too bad. Also, one more compliment for these amazing Koenig seats. The actual mechanism for them to go forward so you can get in the back of the 3-door is ingenious. You actually have a whole lot of space. You don't need to be an Olympic grade gymnast to get back here. But as far as features and practicality back here, honestly, not a whole lot. Basically, you have this very aggressive trapdoor style tube storage compartment, which I'm sure can take your finger off. Also, possibly the most elaborate cup holder for the rear of a car we've ever seen. Check this out. Slides out, but then this section lifts up. You got the little claws, little kind of base section, and it all folds away again. That's great. It's just nice to use as well. But other than that, not many other features or practicality highlights. There's no pull down armrest. There's no real storage back here as such. It's okay. But there can be more bad news for the interior. If the leather hasn't been maintained properly in our harsh UV conditions here in Australia, it can age very poorly, especially on the front seats. There are plenty of reports of this leather just getting really hard and cracking, or it does the opposite. It gets overly loose and just looks a bit shit. But if the leather has been looked after meticulously, it can look and feel fantastic, just like on these. Actually, the same can be said for the fabric interiors as well. But even if well maintained, the leather or the fabric can sort of start to peel off this trim piece. But this actual trim piece itself, as you can kind of see here, the glue behind it can eventually fail and the little plastic clips holding it on, they snap. And this whole trim piece can sort of fall inside the door. And that's not the only bit of trim that can fail. The headliner is known to sag, and especially on these wonderful Koenig seats with their very aggressive bolsters on the entry sides, these are known to kind of get a bit overly squidgy and just wear out over time. Also, no matter what seat or trim spec, just make sure that all the seat adjustments and mechanisms actually work. If they don't, you might be up for some spare parts. Which raises a really unfortunate topic: actually getting those spare parts. As we've said, aftermarket parts and even 3D printing can get you out of trouble. The problem is there are more and more specific parts that are just getting harder and harder to get. Some parts are shared with other Volkswagen models and you can get those, but sometimes even they're starting to ask some pretty extreme premiums. And even when it comes to the R32 specific stuff, there really aren't many genuine front and rear bars or grille pieces around anymore. And the parts that are out there, they can now ask thousands and thousands of dollars. But you know what, look at it this way. If you approach one of these like you're buying a classic sort of old school sports car in the way that it's going to require more care and attention and a lot more money than say a Corolla or a Mazda 3, well, approaching it like that will help you, let's say, emotionally and financially prepare for what's involved in ownership. But it is still just a small Volkswagen Golf, so it's easy to park. Dealing with traffic is a breeze. You can live with it on a daily basis with no problem whatsoever. And thanks to its all-drive system, it just feels secure all the time, and its immense depth of talent and just overall vibe, again, it just feels so special all the time. The problem is, it's not the only car of this kind of genre or sort that can offer you those sorts of things. See, this era of performance cars are quickly becoming sort of the go-to segment for future collectibles. The problem is the R32, it does have some very stiff competition. The Audi TT 3.2 shares plenty with the R32, but comes with prestige badge appeal and more dramatic coupe styling. Then there's the DC2 and DC5 Integra Type R, spiritually and mechanically opposite to the R32 in almost every way, being lighter and more visceral and arguably more satisfying to drive on a tight road, but they do lack the R32's all-weather ability and everyday luxury. The all-drive performance benchmark, the Subaru WRX STI, offers more outright performance than the R32 and more tunability, and a huge parts and community support system. However, it is a significantly less refined car, but arguably the most direct competitor in terms of vibe and lifestyle experience is the BMW 130i. It's another high-revving 6-cylinder in a compact 5-door hatch body, but this time only with rear-wheel drive and premium BMW driver-focused credentials. Although the BMW can be guilty of a whole bunch of mechanical concerns. Actually, so can the Golf. And look, I'd love to open that can of worms, but I don't have a can opener because I'm not a qualified mechanic. Luckily, Jim is.
Let's just start with the non-spicy petrol engines. That means not the GTI and not the R32. Now, these things are getting on now, and the early versions of these are actually 29 years old, which is frightening. It's fairly safe to say that everything in the engine bay has been touched inappropriately at some point, and you're likely to see a bunch of snapped off fittings and blanked off vacuum lines while you're in there. Or while your mechanic's in there, but your mechanic probably doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And if you are in there working on it yourself, look, be very careful of all the wiring, and all the electrical connections are going to be fairly brittle by this point and are likely to snap when you try and unplug them. The ignition systems in these, they are old school with a set of ignition leads and a coil, and that is your most common cause of engine misfires. The next common cause of engine misfires on these is usually emissions related. That means a PCV problem or just a vacuum line leaking somewhere. And the cooling system on these, it is going to need work, and you can expect to see leaks from just about everywhere. Look, basically all bets are off here in terms of what is likely to break, not because they are an inherently unreliable engine, it's just because they're old. Look, onto the GTI, they're actually fairly good engines for their day, but if they've missed services along the way, they do get very unhappy. They do tend to sludge up pretty badly internally, and that can block oil pickups and, more importantly, block the oil feed line, which usually doesn't end well because turbo failures in these are pretty common. Look, across the 4-cylinder petrols, look, they never really were that resilient, and their best days really are behind them. Now, as for the diesels, no, I'm not even going to go into why, just no. Now, all the 4 cylinders, the petrols and diesels, all of the timing belts are likely to be overdue by now, so pro tip, just do the timing belt. Now the 6-cylinder, now some say it's a V6 and some say it's not a V6. You can decide, let us know, put in the comments what you think. Whatever you want to call it, the 6-cylinder in its day was actually fairly reliable. And it is one of the coolest, weirdest, best sounding engines ever shoved sideways in a hatchback. You're likely to see all of the same type of issues you see in the 4-cylinder engines, but everything is way more difficult to get at because of packaging and also considerably more expensive. Now, if you're looking to buy one, insist on hearing a cold start because the timing chain on these is a known problem. And if that timing chain is worn, it is going to rattle a lot more on cold start. Now, these timing chains are at the rear of the engine, so they're a little bit difficult to get at, and you will have to take the transmission out to get at it. And fairly safe to say, if you have the transmission out for any reason, you should just do the timing chains while you're in there. And why would you have the transmission out? Well, I'll tell you, these were the first mass-produced vehicle with a DSG transmission. And the early DQ50s, they did have some reliability issues. The clutches and mechatronics and everything else inside the gearbox is prone to failure. Luckily, we never got them here in Australia, we just got the manuals, which is obviously the one you want anyway. Although they're not perfect, the dual mass flywheel in these is prone to fail. They start rattling and sound bloody terrible. And at this age with higher mileage, you might see some internal bearing complications and you might see some synchro issues as well. The transfer cases and Haldex coupling, look, they're all pretty good if they've been serviced along the way. Pro tip, the transfer case does not fill from the gearbox. It has its own fill point if you're playing at home. Now, because there was a time when these were a fairly affordable sports car, a lot of dickheads bought them. So that means be on the lookout for all the usual shitty mods and crappy parts. Yeah, so overall, look, realistically, this is really one for the enthusiasts. So you don't have to remember all of these problems. We have listed them all out for free. Just go over to ReDriven.com and check it out, or check the link below.
So look, putting it bluntly, if we're talking the more, let's say, consumer levels of Mark IV Golf, we think you would be insane to buy any of those. The GL, the GLE, and you know what, even the GTI, they're simply not worth the headache and the hit to your wallet when there are so many other cars out there that just do a better job in every possible way. For used Mark IV Golf money, check out the Mazda 3, especially in SP23 trim, various Toyota Corollas and Honda Civics, even a Suzuki Swift is a much better alternative. However, when it comes to the R32, okay, that's a whole different story. And look, obviously we'd steer clear of any examples that have a sketchy history or inconsistent maintenance records, unless you're happy to approach R32 ownership as more of a project car to continually work on, rather than something that you'll actually drive on the regular. Plus, with the R32 becoming more collectible, a full service history and a car being as close to original condition as possible can add a substantial premium over equivalent condition cars without documentation. Also, it seems that with the ever-increasing prices, owners are changing how they treat these. More and more are being really well preserved, and that's a trend you need to follow. Look, basically, if an R32 checks out with all those critical pre-purchase inspection checks, and you're totally aware of what you're getting yourself into, yes, you need to buy one of these. The right R32 is an incredibly special car, a definite future collectible, and please celebrate it, which means driving it so we can all see it and experience it. But look, if this still does seem a bit too risky, check out this wild card.
What is going to fail first? And that's not big. Are off here in terms of what is likely to break, and that's not big.